This is episode number 6 of Uncovering Unexplained Mysteries for July 26, 2016.
But either way, how's it going, Mike?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing great. And I'm glad that people are listening to this podcast.
Fine.
I did want to point out, for some people have been commenting on the iTunes and whatever that they're complaining about the quality. Doing these kind of phoned-in style podcasts are not easy through Skype to produce this pristine quality. It's not exactly like Mike sitting in the same room with me. He lives he literally lives the furthest point away in the United States than me, because I live in Florida and he lives in Washington. So
yeah, Vancouver, Washington, not Vancouver, Canada. There's more than one Vancouver. I get that all the time. So you live in Vancouver?
Yeah, there's a bunch of Jacksonvilles as well. There's a Jacksonville, North Carolina as well. But yeah, we live really far away from each other, so we have to do this over the webcams. So I have a good mic, and if he was here, I could set up another and we'd have better quality. If you guys have any suggestions for how we can do this remotely, happily let us know. But enough of that. This time around, we're going to be going over the Belgian UFO, the Kelsey House, which is a haunting, a ghost type of case. And then finally, we're closing in on the legendary Mothman case, which is one of my favorite kind of cryptozoological, mysterious creature type cases.
Mine too, because it's such a standout. You know, everyone talks about Yeti and Bigfoot and the Chupacabra, you know.
Right, but these are all like, for the most part, these are all kind of like over-exaggerated forms of some kind of animal, like a bear, a gorilla. Chupacabra is like this crazy wolf dog thing, but Mothman is like some kind of freakish mutation. But anyway, we'll get to that one at the end. You guys will just have to wait for the Mothman, and he'll be waiting for you outside your window. Go ahead and look. Starting off with the Belgian UFO case, the reason, Mike, you picked this one. Tell us why you picked this one. I'll tell you why.
I picked this one because it's one of those cases where there are multiple witnesses, multiple eyewitnesses who saw the exact same object in the sky, who described it the exact same way as a lot of as the gendarmerie guys, so technically the Belgian police, pretty much. These Belgian police officers who saw this object in the night sky. It has, photographic evidence. It has a radar recording that shows, honestly, is pretty convincing that there was something that was like really unexplained that happened, and the radar recorded it. And because the object was able to go up and then go down at speeds that no human being could possibly survive going down or up at. So it's definitely one of the more fascinating UFO cases because there's so much there. The Belgian government was actually cooperative with Unsolved Mysteries. So it's not one of those where it's just he said, she said, and the government said no comment or declined to be interviewed.
That's why I like this case probably the most, is because, and they even say on the segment, Robert Stack says, in a surprising twist, this segment was filmed with the full cooperation of the Belgian government, which, to say that's setting a standard is a huge understatement, because any case in the U.S. dealing with UFOs always gets shrugged off with a no comment or we don't know what you're talking about, which to me kind of says something about possibly the technology and the advancements that the United States has gleaned from these UFOs as opposed to other countries. You could even say that the U.S. The government is more in the know than a lot of these other countries.
Yeah. I mean, look at something like the stealth bomber, for instance. That kind of technology was unheard of just a few years before that. And then, all of a sudden, wow, now we have, some bomber that's able to stealthily fly across the night sky. And it even kind of looks like a UFO, according to some.
Yeah, and the stealth bomber was always one of the planes that they would bring up in Unsolved Mysteries when talking about possibilities of it not being a UFO. They always reference the stealth bomber, how no one knew what that was, and then the government finally revealed it, which I think is a weak comparison because even looking at the stealth bomber, geometrically, yeah, it's kind of funky looking, but it's still in the shape of a plane. It's still got some kind of propulsion system that is very familiar to most people, and really the only thing unique about it is its shape and it's patented, and they still won't release how it's able to do this, but it's patented. Like I guess it's a paint job or it's whatever coating on to avoid radar detection completely, and it doesn't leave a trail for heat-seeking missiles to follow it around. But besides that, it looks like your regular kind of fighter plane, aside from its funky shape, So it's kind of, oh, well, what about the stealth bomber? We didn't know about that either. It's like, yeah, well, the stealth bomber didn't do anything that any of these UFOs do in these cases as far as the ascension and descension, the acceleration rates,
the maneuverability. The way that some of these UFOs are able to dart across the sky in like a matter of seconds.
Right. So let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this story here. This takes place in Brussels, Belgium. In the fall of 1989, several thousands of people from all walks of life reported that Belgium is being invaded from the sky. Most of these crafts were described as basically a big triangle, and in the middle was a red light. You could see 3 white lights, which formed an equilateral triangle on each end of this craft. In July 11th of 1991, a press conference was held, and high-ranking members of the Belgian military briefed media on these UFOs, and that the Air Force tried to chase down these UFOs and recorded, as you said earlier, the radar screens, and the footage was presented at the conference, which, again, would never happen in the United States.
No.
The UFOs were, of course, met with skepticism as far as, like, if this were to happen in the United States. But, as I said earlier, this was made with the full cooperation of the Belgian government. It all began in a small town on November 29th, 1989, in a small town of called Upon. And I don't speak French or whatever language.
Belgian.
Belgianese. Yeah. I don't speak any of that. So if I
Belgianese.
Yeah. If I butcher any of these names, that would be why. I do speak a good bit of German, though. So if it's a German thing, I might be. But anyway, that brings up another point in this segment. Robert Stack, anytime he pronounced any of these cities or names or anything, he always had a really good pronunciation, and that's because Robert Stack actually spoke, I believe, fluently 3 or 4 different languages, according to his tribute that was on the Ultimate Collection DVD. He knew French, German, and Italian, I believe, in addition to English. So the man was fucking smart, to say the least. So he had really good pronunciation of these names. Someone from the gendarmerie, which is the police department over there, essentially, named Henrik Nicole, whatever. I know I'm butchering that. They were on routine patrol, and they saw a field that was all lit up with lights, and lights like on a huge football field is how he described it. So if you're imagining like a football field, it's all lit up at night, whatever. They thought it was strange, and they wanted to know more, so they pulled over on the side of the road and were just observing these lights. And at that point, they saw this huge triangular craft in the sky, and underneath it had these huge lights, and it had this pulsating light in the middle, and the whole thing was just floating in the air. They called one of the dispatchers, Albert Kreutz, and this motherfucker, he looks so French. This Albert Kreutz guy, and I have not seen a more French-looking dude. And when I think of Frenchman, I think of Albert Kreutz.
Well, going back to the whole when they see the UFO, when you see the light, what looks like a red ball or something that comes out from that was just just unusual, and it definitely is very eerie. And the visual effects in this sequence, okay, they were really good for the time. Kind of early CGI, it looked like it.
Very early.
Very early CGI, like 1991 CGI or something. But it was just a very kind of unearthly sort of thing. I mean, they did a good job showing that this is not something of this world because it's got this red light and then there's this ball thing that's floating underneath it, and you're just like, I don't know. I have no idea. What is this?
Yeah, so they started following this thing, the gendarmerie. It's kind of a fun word to say. They were driving very slowly because the craft was moving slowly. They were saying it almost seemed like someone was in the object, and as if they were trying to observe what was happening on Earth.
And then they called Albert Kreutz, and he has this quote where he says, "Suddenly they told me they were seeing a strange object in the sky. It made no noise. We joked about it and said it might be Santa Claus trying to land."
Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of a funny little observation there.
All these guys are real characters in this one, and I'm not even talking about the reenactors. Like the actual guys they interviewed were very the Andy Griffith show, kind of the Mayberry RFD. That's kind of what they reminded me of.
Yeah.
These kind of bumbling, kind of buffoon type characters. But yeah, the dispatcher Kreutz said he saw something that looked like a laser beam that actually shot out of the ship from where he was where he was watching it. He was watching it out of the window of the police station.
And that's where you have the ball that it was such a really strange.
Yeah, so
the witness.
They continued to follow the object as it circled the city of Upon, and on each side of the object there was a kind of laser beam. And at this part, it was like before there was one laser beam, but at this part they're saying there was two laser beams, and it shot down in kind of like a upside down V formation. And in the middle there was a ball in the center, and it was going back and forth as if it was trying to measure something. Kreutz called the local airports, and they surprisingly reported no unusual activity. As the gendarmerie watched the ship in the sky, all of a sudden out of nowhere, almost like behind them, came another craft.
Oh, no. Yeah.
It was rising up right out of the sky, like right next to them, and they said they were quite scared at first because.
Well, who wouldn't? I mean, that would be terrifying.
Oh yeah,
it's already scary enough that you're seeing this unexplained object floating in the sky silently, not making any noise, looking like something straight out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then here comes another one, out of nowhere. You'd be thinking, oh, is it War of the Worlds? Are we getting invaded? Holy shit.
I can't even begin to imagine the feeling of seeing something in the sky that is not a plane, that is massive in size and has lights and is not making any noise. I just can't imagine the feeling. I can't imagine the fear. I don't know, man. It's like I almost want to know, but at the same time I don't.
I think it would be paralyzed. I think it was like a type of paralyzing fear. I don't think it'd be the type of fear where you'd be screaming, bloody murder.
Right.
I think it would just be the type of fear where you're just standing there stunned and just don't want to move. And you're paralyzed, the kind of fear that Egon was talking about in Ghostbusters, where he's saying when he saw the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man for the first time, and he's like, I'm incapable of rational thought. I'm paralyzed. Paralyzed with fear.
Mike's still on that Ghostbuster month from his YouTube channel. I can see. Got Ghostbusters on the brain.
Yeah.
So moments later, Kreutz saw this same thing, and as he called it, a strange machine. It was floating about 500 feet away. It looked like a large ship floating through the air. Then 6 minutes later, two other gendarmeries encountered the same ship at La Calamie, which is another city in Belgium. At first, I thought it was a joke because they were hearing all these reports coming in from the gendarmes in Upon. But when they saw it, quote, they said it wasn't funny anymore, which I thought that was kind of a pretty powerful quote. we thought they were just joking around and blah, blah, blah. And then they actually see it and it goes, and then it wasn't funny anymore.
Because that's kind of what happens with a lot of these people when they just buff this stuff off, or UFOs or ghosts or whatever. Like, oh, they're crazy. Oh, it's a mass hallucination. Oh, it's not real. It's probably just a plane. And it's just some joke.
Right.
And then when they see it for themselves, then they are like that. You're like, I wasn't laughing. I saw it. I know what I saw, and it was real.
So they were going on to say that it was impossible for them to explain what it was. They thought it was an American plane, and I kind of wanted to comment on that. These other countries for these UFO segments, they always think it's us. They always think it's American. Like every time, like the Falcon Lake UFO, which is another segment that's pretty good. It was a Canadian sighting, and an old guy who was hiking encountered a landed spacecraft, and he touched it and it gave him radiation burns, and he of course he thought it was the Americans. He thought it was us. Everyone thinks it was us. Back in World War II, when UFOs were first sighted, the Germans thought it was our stuff, and we thought it was the German stuff. So we both countries thought it was the other person's ships, but it was neither. I just thought that was kind of funny. I always think it's the Americans.
Yeah.
I always think, well, I mean, which we were a superpower back then. I mean, I guess we still kind of are, but
well, mainly because of the fact that we didn't get bombed back to the Stone Age like Britain and a lot of the other countries did in World War II.
True.
So, I mean, it's mainly because we weren't the ones that were had our infrastructure destroyed, and we were able to take advantage of that situation. And now we're under the realization that we're not really in the same situation anymore that we were in the 50s and a few years after, and a couple of decades after that, because we're there are other countries that have already rebuilt themselves and have actually improved massively, and while we've kind of just stayed kind of the same in certain areas and gotten worse in others.
And then you got these underdogs like India and China who are coming up from obscurity, essentially, who are really kind of becoming world powers of their own.
Yeah.
So anyway, at some point, many other people came out with similar reports. In April of 1990, an extraordinary photo was actually taken that showed this craft that everybody had been seeing.
Yeah, there was 11 other gendarmeries, and more than 100 private citizens came forward with similar reports of the UFOs over Belgium.
Yeah, so this photo, which, again, on Unsolved Mysteries, I love it. They go, using computer technology, we've enhanced this photo. Oh, this fancy computer technology, something that you could literally do on Photoshop now in, like, literally 5 seconds. It was like a big deal back then. But, I mean, it was, because you couldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. A person couldn't do that. But they basically dialed the contrast all the way back, and it showed the actual shape of the UFO, and it was the familiar triangle shape that everyone else had talked about. The image was analyzed, and it became the first photographic evidence of this going on in Belgium.
Yeah.
After that,
forgive me, folks, if you hear any background noise on my end. My parents are home, and I don't know, my mom's getting really loud about something for some reason. So forgive me. There's nothing I can do. I can't duct tape her mouth shut.
Mike lives in a very broken home.
It's not really that bad. It's just my mom gets really loud.
If you guys would like to adopt Mike into your house, write him at his address. So by this time, Belgium, the authorities were getting deluged by thousands of these sightings. Thousands. Yeah. Eventually, these were all coordinated by a privately funded group called Scientists and Citizens, known as SOBEPS.
Mm-hmm.
And they created protocols and ways of kind of processing all these sightings and reports. In March of 1990, a new wave of sightings began, and at one point, Captain Jacques Passon was called by some dinner guests and who reported strange lights in the sky. And the lights were described as much bigger and brighter and not the same colors as stars. They were reddish and yellow and green. And they began traveling short distances in an erratic manner. Around this time as well, NATO detected the same objects in the same area. They were this is where the story really gets cool.
Yeah.
Unable to identify the object on radar, and the Belgian Air Force was now on alert. At this point, and this is one of the first times I think in Unsolved Mysteries history I've heard this happening, 2 F-16 jets were immediately deployed, and their mission was to locate and identify the object in the sky, or the objects. The F-16s eventually locked onto the object, but seconds after that, the object bolted out of range at blistering speeds. The speeds cannot be related to conventional aircraft, and for the next hour, the object seemed to be playing some kind of high-tech game of cat and mouse. Each time they would lock on to this object, it went out of range. It was impossible to accelerate to how fast these objects were accelerating to.
Exactly, and I love the skeptics' explanation for some of this stuff. Even when they see the radar footage, they're all like, "Oh, it's just like weather patterns,
Right.
changes in weather patterns." So, show me these weather pattern changes that look exactly like, these changes in velocity and stuff like that. I mean, really, weather patterns.
And it wasn't just changes in velocity; it was changes in ascent and descent. Because when they first locked onto the target, it was at 7,000 feet, and then it shot up seconds later to 10,000 feet in just seconds.
Yeah,
and then it drops all the way down to only 500 feet in the span of 5 seconds.
And then it accelerated to more than 1,000 miles per hour, which is half 1.5 times the speed of sound.
Right.
I mean, any human pilot that would attempt anything like that would be dead, would not survive.
Oh, we'd be so dead. Human bodies are not meant to do all that shit. The object accelerated faster than the speed of sound, yet nobody claimed to hear a sonic boom, which is another weird thing because, as everybody knows, when you exceed the speed of sound, it creates a sonic boom. You're breaking the sound barrier, essentially.
Well, maybe it only creates a sonic boom for our aircraft because our technology is advanced.
That's what I was thinking of. A lot of these UFOs are said to use some kind of magnetic propulsion instead of like an internal combustion engine or anything like that. So if they're using a whole different kind of, almost like it changes the characteristics of gravity that's around this craft.
Or like warp speed.
It's like the rules don't apply when you're essentially creating this bubble of anti-gravity around you that allows you to just like go through the air like some kind of a submarine, some kind of beefed up submarine would go through water.
Like a knife through butter.
Right.
No.
So the captain was saying about this footage, and this was footage that was captured. The radar footage was captured. The captain was saying it was totally outside of the performance envelope of a normal airplane. And despite all of this, as you were saying earlier, skeptics continue to dismiss the sightings as nothing more than mass UFO hysteria. They attribute the radar footage to faulty readings due to environmental effects such as false echoes.
Yeah. And I'm like, can you show me actual studies I mean, I love these skeptics. It's like, okay, you have a right to be skeptical, but show me actual examples of these echoes or, these atmospheric conditions that create similar results as to what the radar footage shows. Then I might be more willing to be like, okay, all right, maybe it could be, but just telling me, just saying that's what it is not enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, see, what I always love about the UFO cases is they differ from ghosts in the sense of there's just so many people who see these things that are in the sky. It's not like a ghost that's relegated to a house or a property, and only a few people saw it, whatever. But this story in particular,
No, definitely. There's thousands of eyewitnesses of these UFOs in Belgium. So it's hard to dismiss that as just mass UFO hysteria, especially on such a massive level.
And I mean, are there a percentage of these people that were seeing something that was explainable and that was a plane? Sure. But
Oh, yeah.
But the sheer volume, the photograph, the police, you know, getting some of the most credible witnesses possible.
Why would the police make this up? What do they have to gain?
They have nothing to gain, but they have something to lose. Their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, people think they're crazy, so it'd be like, oh, yeah, shouldn't be police officers anymore. You know, shouldn't be upholding the law because you're not sane. You think there's little green men and UFOs flying in the sky. But it seems like they kept their job, which is nice. It's good that the Belgian government, you know, be more accepting of that kind of thing.
Well, and like most police officers, they never go out and say we think they're UFOs. The guy goes, I don't know what I saw. I'm just saying
exactly.
I'm just saying I can't explain what I saw.
Which is another way to say a UFO, because unexplained flying object is what UFO stands for.
Yeah, but you know, as we all know, saying you saw a UFO takes on more of a taboo. Nature.
Yeah, it does. It does. But so does saying a flying saucer. But I would have to say UFO sounds better. It sounds more scientific, or sounds a little bit more within the realm of reality than flying saucer. This flying saucer is stuff that just reminds you of like 50 sci-fi and stuff like that. You know, Earth versus the flying saucers. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, despite thousands of sightings in Belgium, only a couple sightings were reported in neighboring countries like Germany and France.
Yeah, but maybe it was something where specific to Belgium, because maybe there was something there that the potential aliens or whatever might have wanted to study. It looked like they were measuring something, so who knows? Like maybe they just show up in a specific area so they can cover that area and then go do whatever else.
Well, one of the details they were mentioning in the show is that some speculated that the UFOs were potentially attracted to Belgium's highway system, which is literally so bright that it was even visible to the astronauts that were on the moon.
Which is really that's definitely a standout quote. That's how the segment ended too. I think it was Stack said, you know, he said that line. And if it is visible from the moon, pretty visible for any aliens and alien spacecrafts who might fly, you know, around Earth as well. So maybe they might have been wondering how are these lights so bright?
But Mike, we never landed on the moon, so how could they have seen it from the moon?
Don't bring this Room 237 bullshit into Uncovering Unsolved Mysteries. But yeah, it's a very interesting case. It's one that stands out because of the fact that the Belgian government cooperated with Unsolved Mysteries. It had the first ever live broadcast of the radar footage, and you know, just the sheer amount of witnesses. The fact that they all saw the same particular type of UFO. They weren't saying things like, oh, it was a different shape or it was something. No, they all said it was all triangular, had the same light patterns. So, you know, that does lend a lot of credence to me personally to this particular story in this particular case.
Yeah, and, you know, that's kind of nice because a lot of these UFO stories, the descriptions of the UFOs can be vastly different. You know, you can have someone saying it was saucer shaped, someone was saying it was, you know, more of a spaceship type shape, someone saying it's big, some say it's small. But with this case, you get such a uniform description of what the thing actually looked like, that it really makes you think that whatever fleet of UFOs this was, it was the same fleet from the same unknown origin. It wasn't like, just mass. If it was quote unquote mass UFO hysteria, you'd think that maybe it would be people just saying all kinds of different things. But the fact that there's so much continuity to the sightings gives it more credence as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, moving on. We have the Kelsey House,
which is one that I handpicked because for some unknown reason to me, and probably to you and to any fan of the show, this was not on the Ghost set. It was not on the bonus disc that's in the box set. And I don't know why. Like, this has everything you could possibly ask for in an Unsolved Mysteries Ghost segment. It not only has one case, it has two different cases from two different families that happens in the same house. And, you have a kid levitating off the bed, you have the bed levitating, you have spooky sounds that they hear, apparitions, you got a psychic guy who manages to go into a trance and supposedly contact these spirits and talk to them. I mean, it's just a very memorable case, and I was stunned when I saw this on VHS rip from somewhere, and then I was like, why is this not on the DVD? So that's why I wanted to talk about it.
When it came to choosing the segments for the Ghosts section of the Ultimate Collection, they got a lot of things right. They got a lot of good
yes,
on
absolutely.
There. But they made some very bizarre picks as well. I'm sure it was very difficult for them to sift through all their segments and pick out exactly, because you're always going to have fans that wanted one that wasn't on there, and there, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this one is more of the realm of the. It's interesting because you have two different families reporting kind of similar occurrences, and usually with these ghost segments, as soon as a family moves, they always add the side note that
nothing happened in the house.
Yes, ever since such and such family moved out, there have been no reported incidences. That's usually how the ghost story ends on a lot of these Unsolved Mysteries cases. But this one, it's like one family leaves, another family moves in, nothing happens. Then a third family moves in, and then shit starts going down again. So that's what I thought made this one.
And also the fact that the spirit that haunted the first family is supposedly actually, still haunting them over at their next house. And the fact that it's not really an evil spirit, it's more like a guardian spirit, a spirit that just decides to attach itself to this family, not in a negative way, but in a way to protect them, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get into the actual details of this case here. In a hamlet of Fisher Springs, Nevada, which apparently you're supposed to pronounce it Nevada. I was told.
Really? I've always said Nevada. But...
Yeah, apparently, according to this girl I used to know, people from Nevada automatically know you're not from Nevada if you say Nevada. You're supposed to say Nevada.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. This is or not. Any Nevadans who are listening, if you're out there, correct us on that. Anyway, this 120-year-old cottage has been moved 3 separate times, this house. And people find it odd that this house has been able to survive for over a century. Because it's just a typical, just old cottage, but this thing's been around for 120 years, being moved 3 times. It profiles two family stories, the Kelseys and the Robinsons. These are both families who experienced this happening. The Kelsey family bought the house on May 2nd, 1978, 100 years...
Oh, my birthday, but not really. I mean, I wasn't born in the 70s, but yeah, May 2nd's my birthday, so that's kind of interesting.
Oh, wow. That's kind of creepy there, Mike. Starting to think you got some kind of involvement there, fella. No. I got some questions for you there, buddy.
No.
But you were born 10 years later, right? If you were the same age as me.
Yeah. I was born in '89, so there's no way.
Okay, I was 88. Anyway, 100 years to the date after the man who built the house died is when the Kelsey family bought it. From the start, there was something very eerie about the house. I guess you could use the word foreboding to harken back to the Black Hope curse one. But anyway, the wife would say, just as you'd get to sleep, you'd hear steps coming up the stairs. And then the husband would hear a swishing sound like the rustling of a chiffon skirt, which I thought was kind of a funny descriptor of a sound.
Yeah,
But
it is.
Hey, if it helps, It sounded like the tap dancing of a gaggle of midgets on a tile floor. At first, they just thought it was their imagination. But then it started attacking their daughter, or harassing, I should say, or she felt it was harassing them. The Kelsey's daughter, Jennifer, who was 4 at the time, had an even more bizarre experience. One night she rolled over and looked at the bedroom door and saw a little boy who looked sad. And there was a man behind the boy who looked really concerned about him. They didn't look familiar the way that they looked, but she felt like they knew her. And it was that very same night she felt she felt a floating sensation in the bed. And this really scared the mom, because it's one thing that the parents were getting messed with, but then when the little girl was saying that she was being messed with too, that freaked her out.
Then she's levitating like Reagan and The Exorcist, and the bed's floating. Yeah.
But I gotta say, after that ghost boy story,
yeah, I know. Yeah,
I really got kind of jaded, and I'm sitting here. This is all according to the kid, and she said she felt like the bed was floating, even though the segment depicted the bed as floating, and those are two different things. Now,
yeah, exactly.
Just because the segment depicted that the bed was floating, that doesn't necessarily mean it was. She just felt it was.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know why a kid would make that up unless they thought they were dreaming, but the parents felt some shit too, so that gives it credence. Anyway, they called this psychic. His name was Daniel Martin. And this guy, again, was kind of a goofball.
But it was interesting, though, with this whole way of going into the dreams.
Yeah, so this Martin guy comes over there, and then he goes home to his house, and he puts himself into a trance. And then he apparently meets the Kelsey's ghost. And he appeared as a sailing man. He had a mustache. And that's literally the thing that followed him appearing as a sailor, is that he had a mustache. So it's like, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive, but
no, they're not. I mean, look at Tom Selleck. Yeah, he's
I guess sailing man. Tom Selleck is apparently a sailor now. The 80s were a weird and wacky time, man. But anyway, the Daniel Martin psychic guy asked the ghost who he was, and he said his name was Samuel, and that his purpose was to protect the child and not to harm her. And then Daniel pretty much said, well, you're freaking everyone out, so cut it out.
And I love that in the reenactment where he's just like, well, you're freaking everybody out. You're scaring people. Stop it.
and then Samuel promised to not do that anymore. So the ghost is making promises now. I'm not mocking this, I swear. I just think some of the details are kind of funny. They are. He promised not to mock, He promised not to disturb the family anymore. The daughter said she felt the ghost was still in the house, but that the ghost was in the attic. Which, if you know anything about ghost stories, the attic is always a popular place for ghosts to hang out. By then, the Kelseys had 3 children, including an infant son. At this point, they had moved out of that house and moved into a more modern house. While they also owned the property, and they were trying to rent it out to people, which they did. They rented it out to the second family, which did not have any occurrences with this ghost.
I think some people are more in tune to things than other people.
Well, yeah.
So I think that's part of it.
That's definitely like 99% of it. I mean, as we've gone through all these kind of ghost stories and stuff, there are definitely people who have a sensitivity to this that normal people don't. So anyway, the Kelsey family was in their new house, and they were taking pictures. The mom was taking pictures of her infant son on the couch. She had some extra exposures left in the camera, so she's like, I'll prop him up on the love seat and take some more pictures. So that's what she did. And when the camera ran out of pictures, she got the pictures developed. And by the way, back before cell phones and cameras built into cell phones, you had something called a camera and film, and you had to stick the film in the camera and wind it up. And once you took the picture, it was done, and you were stuck with it for better or for worse. Anyway, I'm being very condescending to the younger listeners right now. But it just blows my mind how absolutely obsolete film has become.
Yeah.
To all but hobbyists at this point.
Well, I tried to take a film class, a film camera class, photography class at Clark College here in Vancouver, and I just had to drop it because it was too difficult for me. Like the whole way to have to change the film, like in pitch black darkness, you have to literally take I don't know how anybody does that in the dark room. Like, how the hell do you do
my
that?
friend, I did take a black and white photography class in college, and it was one of the coolest things ever. I mean, I'm not trying to get off on a tangent, but I've worked in a dark room, and
I probably, if I was better at that kind of thing, being able to do kind of stuff like that without help, then I might have went forward with the class. But I couldn't do that, so it was just not something I was able to do.
It's very hands-on, and I'll tell you this right now, you have a lot more of an appreciation for the pictures once they're developed and you did it by your own hand from start to finish.
Yeah.
I still to this day love my black and white 8x10s that I have in my room, and I still have all the proof sheets and all. It's really a lost art that if I had the time and money to build my own dark room in my house, I would still use film and film cameras, because
film has a certain look to it too that I notice a lot of movies nowadays are digital and they do this filtering stuff later and it just looks so fake. There's something about film, 35 millimeter, 70 millimeter. It's just, that's the way films looked, and that's the way they looked for so long. They never were meant to be seen in HD or 1080i or whatever. And it is nice to see it, but it's just it loses something.
Well, it's the same thing when you watch Unsolved Mysteries. Unsolved Mysteries, what you can tell beyond a shadow of a doubt, Unsolved Mysteries was shot on a film camera.
Yeah.
I mean, it screams film, and I love it. It gives it such a nice, nostalgic, kind of foggy look to it. It's just got this really kind of grain, especially the VHS rips that we've been watching. They add even more to it, but that's another story. So so when she gets the film developed, the pictures come back, and as you might have guessed, there is the face of what is said to be Samuel on one of the pictures. The camera roll was only supposed to be of the baby, but there's this guy. And they said on the show that it was the Samuel the ghost, but it actually, I'm going to send you this picture right now. It was actually Phil Collins' first, or his third solo album. The title to "But Seriously," his album. And I'm sending you. Yeah, you see that? That's Phil.
Yeah,
that was Phil Collins. That was.
Yeah, that does kind of look like Phil Collins, but it's got those shadows and stuff, so it makes it look like it's got a mustache.
Yeah, if you can Google Phil Collins album, but seriously, it's literally the picture looks very similar to the. And I just think that's hilarious. Even though
it could be, but I don't. With that album, was that out at the same time?
I'm just joking. I know it's not. I know.
Yeah.
But it'd be awesome. It'd be hilarious if it was though. Like Phil Collins is haunting people even when he's still alive. He can somehow do it.
Seriously.
Yeah, but seriously. So that basically let them know that was Samuel saying, "Hey, I'm still here, and I'm still quote unquote protecting you."
See, that's the thing. Like, how would you feel in that situation? Would you be like, "This is a good thing or a bad thing? Some ghost is protecting me and my family."
I would be scared shitless.
Mm-hmm.
Especially knowing that it can follow you.
Oh yeah.
That would not be good. But then we have this little tidbit of info from the show. They brought in Vernon Miller to analyze the photo. And he was basically saying he can't say for sure, but he can tell that the image was three-dimensional. This is the funny part. He goes, this guy says, a manifestation of a ghost is usually seen as transparent, but this image is obviously, three-dimensional and not transparent, so therefore it can't be a ghost. And I'm just thinking, dude, are you going to say that it didn't have a little ghostly tail like Casper too, so that's another reason why it can't be a ghost? It's like, could you have a more stereotypical outlook on what ghosts can and can't be? Like, well, it wasn't see-through, so that's the first indication that it's not a ghost. I thought that was funny that he said
and
that.
then he said the whole scan lines thing, like, oh, it's a TV, it's clearly a picture from the television. And right. I'm like, I don't see how that is. It's clearly a picture from a TV. Like, why would she? Wasn't this just she was just focusing on the baby, right? Like nothing else, just taking pictures of the baby.
If you were to believe her, that's what she's doing, and that's the whole catch-22 is because it's like, well, it was that a hoax? Because that would be an easy picture to replicate and just say.
Well, in Photoshop it would be nowadays, but back then I think it would be pretty difficult to take a picture that looks exactly like that, off a television screen. But, maybe, but you probably need a really good camera.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could have been one of Phil Collins' music videos on MTV back then, No, I'm just kidding.
But the whole thing with the spirit protecting, I mean, hey, yeah, it's scary, but at the same time, man, I don't think you have to worry about burglars.
You would hope not.
Although, maybe the ghost doesn't give a shit. It only cares about the little girl or whatever.
Well, then I think about stuff like, I mean, is this ghost, like, quote-unquote, protecting me while I take a shower, while I'm having sex, like, while I'm, like, taking a shit? I mean, like, could you not, Like, could you give me some privacy? I mean...
That's like the ultimate invasion of privacy. It really is. Because it's not some stalker, creeper guy, human person that you can kind of tell, it's some invisible spirit. There's no way you can tell what it's doing or what it's not doing. So that would be very scary.
So then, part 2 to this story, the new tenants, the third tenants at Fish Springs,
the Robinson family, Steve and Mona Robinson.
Right, they moved in. And they got caught up in their own ghost story. They heard the footsteps. They heard the bangs. At first, Steve denied it, said there has to be some explanation, as usually always happens. There's one member of the family, usually the male, who does not want to admit that it's true. Their son Garrett started to have frightening experiences, though. For some reason, kids usually seem to be more vulnerable. He started hearing noises, bangings, and laughing of children. One time he heard this upstairs, and he went to the top of the stairs, and then he started hearing humming from like 3 different voices. And I gotta say, on the show, that humming that they did, that sounded really creepy. Like they
did a great job reenacting this. It was very definitely scary, and it's a great example of what you don't see is scarier. Because you don't see any apparitions or spirits here. You just hear the humming and the always creepy music that the show has. And, they did a great job with that reenactment. There's all these different voices humming and whatever.
So after he hears the humming, the kid runs outside, and he, like, looks back at his house. And he's noticing that the screen door is just banging, like, on its own volition. And then and this is another creepy scene in the show, he looks at the window, and he sees an old man standing in the window, like, inside of his house. I mean, if that doesn't say, fuck that, I'm not going back in this house, I don't know what would. As a little kid, you could not, I just wouldn't go back in the house. I just wouldn't. I would have to live somewhere else. I'd have to live in the yard like a dog. 6-year-old Miles, their younger kid, was the next one to be terrorized. One night, again, the bed was getting lifted up, finally, Mona Robinson reached the end of her rope, and she was getting ready for bed, and heard bangings in the hall, and she came down the stairs, and she heard bangings in the hall, and then these bangings coming down the stairs, and then I don't know if I heard this correctly, and maybe you can say you heard it the same way I did. She said all of a sudden, behind the bed, in a man's voice, she heard him call her a bitch in an angry voice.
I don't know if it was bitch or was it Bill or Billy or.
I thought she said bitch, but
it could be bitch. It could be bitch. It makes sense that it would be bitch, because that would definitely be really unsettling. It's already creepy enough that there's this spirit supposedly haunting your house. Then when it gets really, potentially deadly and aggressive, that's really scary.
And again, Steve thought she was going nuts. What a supportive husband. She started just not going to sleep because this shit scared her so much, and rightfully
so. Well, because he hasn't experienced anything, so I could kind of see why he would feel that way. He hasn't seen anything, so under his concept, Steve is like, well, this is just craziness. But then your kids are seeing it too, so that's the thing. I don't.
I've always been the kind of guy that if I really trust somebody or if I'm really close to somebody, especially if I liked him enough to marry him, I've always been the kind of person that I usually believe what my friends tell me, especially if it's in the realm of something like this where they literally, it's not like she's saying, I got promoted at my job and I have a really great job now and I'm better than you, haha. She's saying, no, I heard this freaky shit. I'm the kind of person that if my girlfriend was to tell me that, I'd believe it. I
would too. The whole thing is with people who doubt this kind of stuff, unless your significant other has had a history of just making shit up and just joking around or this kind of thing, then I don't see any reason to be like, oh, she's just nuts or she's this or I don't believe it or whatever. Maybe she is having some kind of psychosis, but until that becomes clear, if she's normal. If you're going through some psychosis or mental breakdown, hallucination is not the only thing you're going to be dealing with. So, you're going to notice that it's not just, oh, she's saying some crazy things. She actually is crazy.
Well, then you have the kids to take into account, too. It was just her. So, that's another big one. And you see the passion in somebody when they're really afraid, that's something you can't really fake, No. They may not know what they saw, but they saw something.
Yeah.
So, January 31st, 1990, the Robinsons moved out after only 4 months after they moved in. Now, that right there, as a kid, I would have just brushed that off. But being an adult, hearing that, I'm thinking, oh, man, they broke the lease. They blocked to rent another U-Haul. I'm thinking about all the logistical pain in the asses that implies. And that's, a lot of people don't have the luxury of just up and moving like that. But man, after only 4 months of living in a new place, that's 4 months is just the amount of time that you kind of start getting settled in. You get all your stuff unpacked and put where you want it. And now you're having to up and leave. And like I said, they probably broke some kind of a lease and oh, what a pain in the ass that must have been.
But they were probably like, you know what? I'd rather deal with that, with breaking the lease, than dealing with a ghost that's calling me bitch and tormenting my kids.
Yeah, very true. It depends on how much money you have because I might have to deal with the ghost calling me a bitch. Not gonna lie. Again,
I can just imagine a parody of this kind of thing, the whole sort of if In Living Color did it. Imagine, the whole sort of In Living Color stuff that is sort of, black comedy. Could you imagine that? You bitch! Don't call me bitch!
Show yourself, motherfucker!
Oh, hell no! But apparently the Kelseys, they sold the house in 1992. And as of now, according to research on the Unsolved Mysteries wiki, it is now owned by a casino in Las Vegas. The house is presently being investigated by a paranormal team. The house was moved from to its present location from another Virginia city. So it was moved again, apparently. Or it's still there. Or there was another thing on YouTube where this guy says people were saying they went into the Kelsey House and it's like abandoned and they tore it down recently, but that's not really the Kelsey House. It's some other place. So yeah.
Well, that goofball Daniel Martin, like after they experienced that, he came in there again and he went into hallucination and he put himself into a trance and met the ghost.
How does he do that? That's the thing I'm wondering too. Is like, how does he go into this trance? Like, what does he do?
He's thinking, all the money I'm getting for the hourly rates that I charge, $100 an hour that they're paying me for this bullshit ghost story, I'm going to buy myself a new boat with this money. I could put myself in a trance by doing that, I think.
Yeah.
But he encountered...
Just imagine him hypnotizing himself or something. Like with a sort of metronome or with a watch.
Yeah.
It just... I'm getting very sleepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he encountered 3 entities this time, 2 men and one woman, and his first impression...
And that ties in with what the kids were saying, that they were saying they were hearing the voices of 2 male ghosts and 1 female ghost.
Oh, yeah, it's true. I need to connect those details, but yeah, that's true. But he said that these ghosts were troublemakers, and they were rowdy, and they were unlike unlike Samuel. They were just there to kind of cause trouble, which is the worst kind of ghost. You don't want someone like that in real life, and you don't want someone like that in the afterlife either.
No.
He asked the spirits to leave, but by that point the Robinsons had already moved, so it was kind of too late. I don't know why they waited that long to call that guy out there. Anyway.
Exactly. It's like Beetlejuice dealing with some rowdy ghost. You know.
Yeah.
They want that.
So, I mean, I know you just gave us an update, but I guess before the casino bought it, years later, they sold the house to a couple who bought the house with full knowledge of the hauntings, and they lived there for 8 months and had no experience with hauntings. So it was like every other person.
8 months? That's pretty short. Or maybe they did experience something, but they would felt embarrassed if they, There's that, too. I'm not trying to be conspiracy theorist here, but there's that, too. There's a possibility of that people might have experienced some hauntings or crazy stuff, but they just refuse to admit it, or they don't want to admit it in public, and they just want to keep that under wraps.
Well, to me, if you're buying a house with full knowledge of the hauntings and you experience some hauntings, you're going to want to tell people about it, because these guys seem like the kind of people who some people just don't want to believe. Yeah, they're either those kind of people, or they're those kind of people who are just so overzealous for ghosts and they think it's so cool. They're like, oh, I want to live in that house. I want to live. That's so cool, So
yeah.
They're either one of the 2 types of people there, I think. I don't know. I guess a casino has it now, though, and it got moved or something.
Which is funny, a casino owning a haunted.
Yeah, it's just another way for them to make a buck, sadly. Everything has to get exploited at some point to make money, and then the ghosts probably get disgusted by the capitalistic nature of these owners, and they go somewhere else.
Go haunt the casino.
There's enough deadbeats in there already. See what I did there? See what I did? All right, our final story, the creme de la creme of this podcast, as far as I'm concerned, is the Mothman legend. This story, as we were saying before, is really neat because unlike, your Bigfoots and Chupacabras, this is a very different kind of entity that we're dealing with. It's been described.
When I first heard of this one, I think I read it in a book or something. It wasn't this segment. It was like a book that was talking about different unexplained things, and it mentioned, creatures and stuff like that, cryptozoological type of stuff, and Mothman was one of them. And that case always stood out to me because I was just like, this is just strange, surreal, and downright terrifying. And then the whole stuff with the Men in Black and how it was, there could have been a little connection with the bridge, falling apart, and then all of this. It just felt like it was like, wow, like this is very interesting and terrifying too.
I mean, when you start off an Unsolved Mysteries episode where you're saying, crumbling buildings outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia are home to a terrifying creature. I mean, you don't need to say any more, man. You got me. Like, I'm
exactly.
hooked. Like,
Yeah.
This is already.
Finger.
I already love this. Whatever this is about, whatever Robert Stack's about to say, I'm already on board. Like, so the origins of this fucker, as we were saying, Mothman. He's been described as standing 7 foot tall or better, enormous glowing red eyes, bat-like wings, man-like legs.
Gray or black in color.
They had one guy on there, and I thought this was kind of funny. The guy that they interviewed like several people. They had little snippets of their interview at the beginning of the segment, and the last guy who actually saw Mothman during the day, he goes, that was the ugliest bird, and I do mean bird, that I've ever seen.
I remember that. And
so I'm listening to that going, okay, it's the ugliest bird, and you do mean bird. So you're saying it's definitely a bird and not a moth creature? Like, I don't understand why you're.
But then he adds the whole thing where he's like, and I never want to see it again.
That guy came off to me as somebody who, like, probably hadn't been on camera much in his life.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying most people have, but I mean that guy seemed a little excited to be on camera. But anyway, there are a certain percentage of citizens that feel like it's 101% a hoax. But the point of it is hundreds of ordinary people have seen something that they can't explain in the woods of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and they call it the Mothman. This all started on November 15th of 1966. Linda Scarberry and her husband and another couple were heading to an old munitions factory called the TNT, and it was used during World War II. It was at this facility that the Mothman would make its debut. I find it funny that, like, this story is about, like, the first sighting was these teenagers going to this old munitions factory.
Yeah. It's something straight out of a horror movie. It really is.
Yeah, and then it's like, I wonder what they were going out there to do to an old abandoned factory. These two couples, those freaks, wanting to get involved in some kind of weird 1960s free love orgy.
But maybe that's what the Mothman doesn't like. He doesn't like people, fornicating.
The Mothman is just a very hardline conservative. He's trying to instill morality in the citizens of Point Pleasant. But no,
because they're not being very pleasant. They're not living up to its name.
They wanted to feel very pleasant from that, once they got there. But Mothman just was the ultimate cock block, and it just didn't happen. Nothing softens a boner more than a cryptozoological freak show like the Mothman.
They're described as half man, half bird, glowing red eyes, and a wingspan of 8 to 12 feet. Think about that, folks. Just put that image in your head. Like, that's enough to make you, piss your pants in fear, run just scared shitless, literally.
Well, then not only that, when they pull up to the thing, it lets out this horrific screech. Yeah. So, of course, they go, well, we'll have to take a rain check on that necking session. Let's get the fuck out of Dodge. So they drive away, and the car is approaching speeds of 100 miles per hour.
Over 100, I think. They said 100 or over 100.
And I mean, for a car in 1966, going 100 miles, shit, that's something.
And so you would think if this was a bird, that they would easily be able to outrace or outrun. I don't really like using the word outrun though with a car. But you think they'd easily be able to escape from a bird if they're driving in a car at around 100 miles per hour or over 100 miles per hour. But no, this thing is in close pursuit. It's like right behind them. Like right. I mean,
in fact, it was like it was hitting the top of the car. It was gliding from side to side. And then finally, when they hit the lights of the city, the Mothman fell back and went away and disappeared.
That's not a bird. Birds can't do that.
No. The very next night, Marcella Bennett was leaving her brother's house, walking outside to her car with her daughter in her hand as...
This is the one that really is probably the scary. The other one, the first one's pretty scary too. It's just this one, the whole thing where it's at your house.
Right. Like, the first one, you were kind of on its turf, but this one is just at some residential home. So when she gets... she reached for the door handle and she saw what looked like legs in front of her, and she kept looking from the feet up, and she's quoted as saying she was looking at something that she had never seen before. That's all she knew to say about it. So her and her daughter booked it back inside of her brother's house, and in the segment they depict this creature. The brother turns the lights off and closes the blinds and locks the door and all, and this creature's just you just see its silhouette pretty much with its red glowing eyes, and it's in the window, and it's this big just creature with these red eyes. And I mean,
that's sending a chill down my spine, just when you're describing that, making the hair stand up on my skin.
That's probably the scariest moment of the segment was that. The prop department, I thought, did a pretty damn good job in not... They would never show it for too long, and it was very...
It's because it probably wasn't a very good prop. But might have, if you freeze framed it, it looked like it might have been made out of like pipe cleaners they bought at the craft store, but and just hung on a string. But they did a great job shooting it to the point where it was obscured enough that you couldn't tell how cheap the effect was, and it was still effective that way.
It was a really good practical effect.
Yeah, it was, because they even if it was cheap, they did a good job shooting it, which is something that with practical effects you can always do that and do a really good job with that kind of thing, or maybe be able to hide some things, at least for stuff like this, where it's not necessary to show it a lot. CGI, it's harder to me because they artificially light it, and it doesn't match with what's going on in the sequence. So it doesn't match the lighting that's in the room. So they still haven't gotten that right. So you can tell that it's CGI because the lighting doesn't match.
Right.
But
as this thing was standing out on the front porch, like looking in, basically, the lady was quoted as saying that she never thought in her wildest dreams that she would be looking at something like that standing out there. It was unbelievable. And I can imagine that. I mean, if you put yourself in that position, it's just like you're thinking, this isn't really happening right now. There's no way that this is really happening.
You're thinking, I'm hallucinating. I'm going through some kind of breakdown mentally. I need to quit drinking. Or I somebody drugged me or something. What is going on here? Is this a nightmare? And then when you realize that you're awake and it's not a dream, that's when the realization hits that, holy shit, this is actually happening. What the fuck is that thing?
And probably
is it going to kill me? Is it going to break through the window and eat me? I've seen horror films. This does not end well usually.
Right. And then you have to live your whole life with the knowledge of that, like this existed, this happened, and we don't know what it was.
That would torment me for the rest of my days. It really would, because it'd be something that it would take a long time just to kind of get past that. But even if you could, but there would totally be days where you'd have probably PTSD type flashbacks.
Oh yeah.
Of this particular incident, because it really is horrifying, and the whole realization that everything that you knew about the world and everything you knew about the world around you is just not real. It's not true, because there's this creature that exists, and you don't know where it came from, and you don't know where it went. It disappeared, but as far as you know, it could possibly come back. And that's just a terrifying thought. It's just, and the imagery would just stick with you. And it sticks with me anyway. I haven't even experienced it for myself, and it's still imagery that sticks with me. It imprints itself into my subconscious in some ways, but it's not as nearly as much of a it's not as much of a connection as it would be if you actually saw it. Because there's a difference between watching a reenactment of something on a show or reading about it versus actually seeing it.
Yeah, I showed my friend this segment a long time ago, and to this day, I can't even say the word Mothman without her just going, stop right now, stop. Like, she got so scared just by seeing that segment. Like, she can't even hear the word because she's, like, forever afraid of this thing now. Like, that's how, how potent this thing was.
I could see why. It's a very foreboding, scary, cryptozoological creature of some sorts. Mobs and insects are creepy enough as on their own, but like a man-sized one with demonic glowing red eyes, yeah, with screeching like some kind of death wail, yeah, that's pretty terrifying. It's definitely blood-curdling.
A few days later, Tom Urey, the goofball I was talking about earlier, who said, and I do mean bird, he was driving near the TNT area. And he's so far the only person to see Mothman during the day. He caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye, and he thought it was a helicopter. And the huge bird that circled, it was a huge, from what he says, it looked like a huge bird that circled his car, making big loops, getting lower and lower. And you know, he started getting a little scared because he didn't want to be breakfast. And then it made a loop back to the left and went back over the riverbank. When he got to where he was going, he called the Point Pleasant Sheriff's Office and reported the incident. And then over the years, the sightings increased. The descriptions were similar. It was described as part man and part bird with huge red eyes. And this story eventually, you know, caught the national and then eventually global attention, and thousands started to flock to the TNT area in Point Pleasant to catch a glimpse. The press was everywhere. Everyone was on edge to see what the outcome would be. And as everyone searched for Mothman, other weird occurrences started to happen. Now, this is another part of the story that freaked me out. And they just kind of gleam over this detail, and then they go into the Men in Black thing.
The animal mutilations? Yeah.
They're like, other weird occurrences started happening. Residents would go out to their farms, and their animals would be dead with just the blood gone or just the heart removed.
Yeah.
Which, that sounds more like the MO of the Chupacabra. That's more of like...
Or the cattle mutilations that were going on, which people would say were also related to extraterrestrials. You know, UFOs and stuff like that, with their cattle that are found with parts missing, blood drained, you know, stuff like that.
Man, PETA would have a field day. They would have an earful for those aliens. Look, buddy, I don't care where you're from. You do not treat cattle that way. They have rights. And then next thing you know, anal probe. But anyway, the town started to receive visits after this incident from enigmatic strangers, and their penchant for dressing in all black earned them the name the Men in Black. Now, these people would show up...
Men in Black!
Men in Black. The difference between you and me is I make this look damn good. Am I quoting the wrong movie? No, that's the right movie. I'm gonna fit in that Will Smith reference whenever I can on this podcast, because I just thought it was so corny. But anyway, the Men in Black, like the real Men in Black, showed up in you know, from the other case, and we're gonna do a segment on.
They reminded me a lot of the Men in Black. Kind of the people you see in black clothes in the movie Dark City. I don't know if you heard of that.
I've actually seen that one, but I haven't seen it in a long time.
Very similar sort of look that a lot of these Men in Black in some of these reenactments and discussions people have about the Men in Black. Sometimes they say they look human. Other times they say they look kind of human, but they're like really pale. So that's what it kind of reminds me of the people in Dark City.
There's a whole segment on Men in Black on Unsolved Mysteries, and we'll cover that one at some point, because that in and of itself is very, very interesting. The Men in Black just in and of themselves.
I didn't even know anything. I thought it was just a movie thing or a comic book, because the movie's based on a comic. until, I saw segments like that and read some UFO books, and I'm like, oh, the Men in Black. Oh, all right.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But yeah, I mean, again, it's like, all this kind of stuff that makes it into movies, I feel like is all taken from real life happenings, so it makes sense that the Men in Black is a real thing. I mean, even just thinking about the government and FBI, they have a penchant for dressing in all black. So, I mean, just, to go that far, it's not much farther of a
No.
stretch to think that there is these secret operatives that are silencing.
Yeah, so, these Men in Black showed up. People believe they're from the government, and that makes sense. So they said that they tried to get these residents of Point Pleasant to stop talking about the Mothman. And some people were justifiably scared by this and, stopped talking about the Mothman.
Yeah, they terrified a lot of the original witnesses, they said on the show. One theory is that the Mothman was a government experiment that's gone horribly awry, and that's kind of why it explained the Men in Black being out there, is because it was government related. Others
or it could have been an extraterrestrial of origin. They might have known about it, and they want people to keep quiet. Or, that could be it. Or people had theory that it was a mutated bird.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that. Some of the other theories were eyewitnesses were actually seeing a large bird, more specifically the sandhill crane. This part really pisses me off, and I made a video about this along a top 10 unsolved mystery segments, and this is something I bitched about in that too. The sandhill crane, indigenous to the area, stands nearly as tall as a man, and it has large red patches of skin above the eyes, and that's what they might be seeing. And it's like, man, shows always do this kind of shit. There's always someone out there that goes, well, actually, what you saw was the sandhill crane, and it had red patches, and it's like, how stupid do you think we are that, first of all, did the patches of skin on its fucking face glow? Because this one glowed. And secondly, was it big and beefy? And no, the sandhill crane is like a broom.
Did it have a wingspan of, 8 to 12 feet? Does it fly at over 100 miles an hour? Does it have man-like legs? Bat-like wings?
Yeah.
Is it 7 feet tall?
Yeah, so that was a lame excuse for an explanation that they tried to give. The third explanation, which is
there was even the guy who, after might have even been the guy himself who came up with that description, who was like, yeah, but that's probably not it, or something like that.
And he was, to his credit, he was saying that in the segment. The guy was just kind of like repeating theories that he had heard, and he was saying that, none of the other description fits the sandhill crane. So, but my third and favorite theory of what this could be was that eyewitnesses, or that the TNT was originally a bird sanctuary before World War II brought a lot of armaments and pollution to the area. So they're suggesting that combined with the genes of the animals and the toxins and pollutants, it made a mutant-type bird creature. That is my favorite. I hope that's the true one right there, because
this looks like something straight out of a comic book.
That does, and if that's, that's great. Like, that needs to be like a Marvel comic book villain, like the Mothman. Some thought Mothman was linked to a tragedy in Point Pleasant. The Silver Bridge collapsed. It was one of the bridge linking Point Pleasant to the rest of.
Yeah, it collapsed. It killed 46 people. One witness claimed to have seen the Mothman on the bridge shortly before the collapse. The cause of the collapse is later determined to be a structural failure, but who knows? Maybe the Mothman was trying to warn people of something. There's concepts and ideas that have been thrown out about that. There's been plenty of books that have been made about the Mothman, including the Mothman Prophecies, which was turned into a film with Richard Gere. And I've seen that movie, and it's been a while since I saw it. I remember they did a great job, really reenacting the Mothman sightings. And if you're interested in Mothman and you're curious about it, I do recommend that movie. I really do. Richard Gere did a good job as well, performance-wise, and it focuses on the whole sort of connection between the Mothman and the Silver Bridge. And yeah, it was. I actually think it's a pretty underrated movie. It's kind of a film that's kind of been forgotten about and kind of fell by the wayside, and people don't really talk about it that much.
I actually remember that movie being advertised in theaters back when I was a kid. Because like way before I knew anything about this Mothman segment on Unsolved Mysteries, I remember hearing that title, The Mothman Prophecies, now in theaters or whatever, and I thought that sounds interesting. Whatever. It honestly sounded too scary for me to want to see it as a kid. But now I'll probably go and give it a watch. So when I saw the Mothman segment on the Unsolved Mysteries DVDs, I was like, I wonder if this has anything to do with that movie, and turns out it does. So I'm definitely gonna give that a watch now, because I was unsure actually before this very day when I talked to you before we started taping that you said, yeah, that's actually where it came from. So I was like, oh, well, I gotta go check that out now. Since the bridge collapse, the bridge has been repaired and all that, and the Mothman sightings have virtually stopped. So again, trying to lend credence and credibility to a story, it would make sense that this thing would eventually die.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's not seen anymore kind of makes me think that perhaps this was some kind of a mutant bird or whatever, and it eventually died, and it was the only one of its kind, and that's why.
Yeah.
Now if it was a hoax, then this thing could be perpetuated ad nauseum, for ever. But the fact that that hasn't really happened kind of leads me to believe that it was a genuine article, and once it died of natural causes or whatever, that it just kind of stopped, So this is one of the truly scariest, creepiest unknown or unexplained segments on Unsolved.
I agree. And another thing is that kind of adds some credibility to this case is the people who drew drawings of what the Mothman supposedly looked like, they were very similar. So that's another thing. If it was kind of just, and these weren't people that knew each other, they weren't friends, all of the different witnesses, there were some people who were friends but then not everybody who saw this was related to one another or friends or acquaintances. So, that would lend to something, okay, they could have made it up, for publicity or whatever. But yeah, it's one of those things, we don't really have the proof, like photographic proof. We don't have the Mothman carcass or anything. So it is one of those cases where it's kind of hard to be like, oh, there's no cold, hard facts here. There's no smoking gun. There's no anything that's like, oh, that definitively proves that the Mothman existed. But, you could say that for a lot of other things.
To me, that's one of the beauties of Unsolved Mysteries as a show in general, is that it was
around. It doesn't make your mind up. It doesn't try to do that.
Well,
I never really thought Unsolved Mysteries tried to ever influence you or try to make you, okay, this is what really happened. It existed. This is why. No, they give you opposing viewpoints, even if some of them might be kind of stupid, like a fucking bird, really. I'm pretty sure we're smart enough we can tell what's a bird and what's not.
Well, I mean, I also like it because this show came out in a time where there weren't smartphones and there wasn't these little miniature computers that everyone held in their hands. So, these myths and legends are a lot more tantalizing, based off the simple fact that there wasn't a lot of photographic evidence. There wasn't a lot of recordings. There was just
Photoshop it. You couldn't,
Right. It was just word of mouth and scary stories, and the physical evidence that was left behind was very compelling. You know, it's not like you could take a 10-second Snapchat video of this thing and put it up for all to see and mock and be like, oh, this is fake. And so, I
Well,
mean,
that's the thing. I think in where we are in society now, I think, and that is kind of a thing that would be a problem. I think there might be videos that might prove some crazy shit, but I think a lot of people would just rather assume it's not real, and they'd pick it apart and they'd say, I don't believe it, I didn't see it, we don't know what's going on. That's probably fake. And it could very well be actual footage of some UFO or some cryptozoological creature of some sorts. And people would be on YouTube just being like writing comments on fake. You know, I mean,
the vetting process for this stuff must have certainly gotten much more difficult these days than it was back in the old. I mean, it's got to be easier because these same because I'm sure there's still these private groups out there that are still like on the hunt for this stuff, and they can use modern technology to their advantage, but it's also used against them in the sense that they have all these fraudulent pictures and videos that are coming up now that, you know, that used to, you could pick it out in 2 seconds if it was a fraudulent video or not.
Exactly.
Probably one of the most frustrating cases when it comes to this kind of stuff that, to me, was an Unsolved Mysteries segment on the Ultimate Collection dealing with crop circles in England, and how they set up a camera that recorded for like 2 weeks straight, and how they said they got like 7 or 8 crop circles in that time period, and they said 2 or 3 were genuine hoaxes, but the other 4 were the real deal, and they said the film footage is still being analyzed, and I've never heard another thing about it since that segment. I'm so pissed because I'm like, what did they end up finding out? Damn it. They're essentially saying that they have on video crop circles being made.
Well, maybe that was found. Maybe they did find the video did have crop circles being made, but then, you know who, the U.S. government gets involved, and then it's like,
Yeah, but these people were based out of England, though. But I mean, the English and American governments are in such cahoots with one another that who knows? You know, maybe our government imposes sanctions on them too when it comes to stuff like UFOs, because they feel like it's for the natural safety and you know, good benefit of the mankind, or whatever the fuck you want to say it, by withholding this information. Speaking of which, I kind of want to read this. I mentioned earlier this guy Tom DeLonge, the old singer from Blink-182, has spent extensive time and has been very visible when it comes to the whole UFO phenomenon. And
his book, I think, Secret
Machines.
And I've seen some reviews of that on Amazon, and it's like they say things like, oh, it's like pseudo fiction, you know, so it's kind of like pseudo nonfiction. That's what I meant, pseudo nonfiction, where it's kind of based on maybe some reality, but then it's got, you know, a fiction story that's, you know, in there. And I think that's kind of his way to be able to kind of divulge some of this information, I guess.
Well, this particular thing that he posted on Instagram was from an upcoming documentary, and it wasn't from the book. I'll just go ahead and read it real quick, because if you're interested in UFOs and things of that nature, this might be a valuable piece of information. Now, granted, Tom DeLonge is a big public figure. He's not just some conspiracy theorist wearing a tinfoil hat out there. So his words have a little bit more weight to me as far as I'm concerned. The caption, or the picture they post, I mean, it shows a picture of 2 UFOs, and it looks like an old grainy photograph. But I mean, who's to say if that's real or not? I mean, I'm guessing if he's
truth is out there.
If he's wanting to establish, but no, I mean, if he's wanting to have any kind of credibility, I don't know why he posted a fake picture of a UFO on his Instagram. But anyway, he says, "We are getting very close to showing you all a piece of the documentary. Been working on this for a long time. This week I flew across the country and spent 12 hours with 2 scientists from the CIA and a very high-level person from the Defense Department. Our country has been doing incredible things in relation to this topic. Every decision they made, as hard as it is to comprehend now, really was in our best interest. At first, your instinct is to be angry because you feel like you were lied to, left out of something important. But once you know the facts, you'll be proud of what our country did. Very proud. And that's all it reads.
Interesting.
Yeah. So apparently,
I don't know, because you had the alien autopsy video that for many years was kind of viewed as being the real deal, and then it was found out to be a hoax. So I guess I'll wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see what he's been working on because I've been keeping up with him.
It's interesting. It is interesting.
Because of who he is, he's been able to get access to these high-ranking people that your normal Joe Schmo wouldn't be able to talk to. So. I want to know. Damn it. I want some fucking answers.
You want the truth? You can't handle the truth.
I might not be able to, but, that's for me to decide. It's my personal right as an American. All right, Mike, is this all we got? I think this is all we got.
I think that's all we got. I don't have anything else to say about Mothman, except I definitely don't want to see him flying around my window at night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly want to see him. I mean, if I'm going to, it would be nice if he ate like some insects around my house and did shit like a normal moth does, but maybe on a larger scale. That would be helpful. But yeah, anyway, for me,
I was gonna mention, the pictures and stuff, the artist renditions people did of the Mothman. Like, some of them are kind of crude, but they still just give me chills.
Oh, yeah.
They were darkness.
Yeah, they were very freaky.
Red eyes.
It's definitely worth a Google. I mean, at least look it up on Google. I highly doubt you'll be able to find any clips of it on YouTube because Viacom and...
I think there's other shows that have talked about the Mothman, though, but you're not going to be able to find the Unsolved Mysteries segment unless you buy the Strange Legends set, which is expensive. So good luck.
So really, all you have is us two bumbling idiots trying to recreate.
I call us idiots, but yeah.
I'm kidding. I find self-deprecating humor funny.
Yeah, I can find it funny too, but.
Yeah. All right, guys. For me and Mike, that's the podcast. You can find us on literally find us on anything now. You can find us on iTunes. Please, if you go to review us, try to keep in mind that we're doing the best we can as far as the audio quality is concerned. We are thousands of miles away from each other, so we can't exactly have like studio quality microphones in the same room. Oh. If anyone has any suggestions on how to improve that, please let us know. You can find me at youtube.com/dancingwithghosts and then the number 2. And you can find Mike at youtube.com/OCP communications. I'm thinking about making a Facebook page for this podcast since we're getting a lot of listens.
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah, we can have a more universal way of connecting with people so we can maybe address some of this stuff and you can give us suggestions easier. Because I think a lot of people don't feel like typing all that shit in on YouTube, but if they can just find us on Facebook, maybe it'll be easier.